Clinker Factor, the cement industry podcast.
Welcome to the Clinker Factor, and I should say welcome back after the New Year holidays and celebrations. The Clinker Factor is a podcast from WCA, which looks at the cement industry's response to climate change around the world and other topics of interest. I'm Ian Riley, CEO of WCA, and your host on the Clinker Factor. So today I'm talking to Ryan Cialdella, who's Vice President of Innovation and Market Development at Ozinga Concrete in the US. Ozinga provides concrete solutions via truck, rail, barge, and ship across both the Midwest and Florida. And it's a family business that was founded in 1928. So Ryan, welcome to the Clinker Factor. I wonder if you could start by introducing yourself and how you came to be in the concrete business.
Sure. Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for having me in. Glad to be here. Looking forward to the discussion. I started at Ozinga about 19 years ago. Started off in the dispatch office and kind of worked my way around the company in various facets through dispatch, operations, ran a division, and then founded our R&D lab about 4 or 5 years ago. And now I oversee what we call our customer development group, which includes our inside sales, marketing, and technical services group.
Let's start out by just setting the scene with the challenges that the concrete industry is facing at the moment. So what are the things at the top of your list?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, and probably sound like a broken record to a lot of other industries, but right now is realistically just hiring and retaining employees. That's been a challenge, for as long as I can remember, but definitely now more than ever. So I'd say that's probably one of our largest challenges right now. But when it comes to the material side of things, right now is really just the ability to procure and acquire low carbon materials in their use within our concrete and to make sure that they don't affect the performance. Right now, here specifically in the States and in the Midwest, we're going through a change where the cement suppliers are now switching everything over to a Portland limestone cement, a 1L. And there's definitely been some discussions, good or bad, with the specification community and owners as they're just not quite ready for it. And the cement producers have really just kind of drawn a hard line in the sand, which I can appreciate, because if they just kind of continued to say, we're going to do it, and you never really get there. So the cement producers in this market have really just said, okay, we're done with type 1-2 cement and we're moving over to PLC. So that's been a little bit of a challenge, just as a lot of the PLCs are not found in all the specifications. So overcoming those challenges and just having a lot of those discussions around what is that going to do to the performance, not only hardened properties but plastic properties.
So in making this change from type 1, which is OPC, to PLC, which has, do you know the proportion of limestone that you're getting typically in these cements?
Sure. The ASTM C595 here in the States allows for up to 15% underground limestone. So the cement producers they're anywhere from the neighborhood of 10 to 12.5% with the underground limestone, whereas the type 1-2s, they were only allowed up to 5%. But from our perspective, we've been testing it and using a PLC here for some time, and the performance is it's one of those things you wouldn't know if you didn't tell anybody.
Right. So are you having to reformulate your concretes in order to use it, or just to drop in 1-for-1?
Yeah, it's a 1-for-1 replacement. I mean, the way that they're producing the 1L cements, they're actually grinding a little bit finer so that you don't sacrifice any of that performance up front.
Right. Okay. And that's having obviously an impact on the carbon footprint, presumably reducing it, just in proportion to the limestone?
It's not as much as, it's not a 10-12%. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 or so percent. Yeah. We've seen a reduction overall. But yeah, it is helping. And it's kind of just that process of marrying all these different technologies to really try to drive that carbon footprint down.
So one of the things that seems to be happening in a number of markets is that the contractors and specifiers and developers are more willing to engage in let's say a sort of whole supply chain discussion about how to meet their objectives. So it's not just about cost anymore, it's about other things, in particular carbon. And are you seeing that in your markets? Is that one of the things that is driving low carbon demand?
Yeah, I would say probably over the last year, we've really seen a shift in the type of discussions that we're having. We're being brought into these conversations much earlier, whereas in the past, the only time we would talk to a specifier or a general contractor if there was really an issue or a problem. Now they're coming to us early on in the development and design stages of their projects and saying, hey, this is what we want to do. Can you do it? And if you can, to what extent can you reduce the carbon footprint? What does it cost? How's the performance? So really these conversations are happening, I would say, almost daily now. And we're getting calls just out of the blue from these developers and even owners, all the way up to owners, wanting to have these discussions with us just to see how we can help them, because that's really, where they need to go at this point in time to meet their reduction goals.
And is that a point of differentiation? Is that something that you're able to do better than some of your competitors?
I would say, we were a little bit out ahead of the game. We were kind of prepared for this. We went through and did EPDs for all of our plants and our locations. We were early adopters of CarbonCure, which is a carbon reduction technology back in 2016. So we've been a little bit ahead of the game, but I think as the competition has started to see that, to play in this space, you're going to have these conversations, be open to reformulating, changing, doing more trials, and working with these specifiers and even our contractors to really develop a solution that works for them without really, most importantly, not affecting the construction schedule, because that's really where the money comes in. They're okay with a small premium on the low carbon concrete, but you've got to be able to reformulate these designs so that you're not causing, a large delay in set or early strength gain.
And are you seeing that on particular projects, the developers are willing to, or the contractors, I guess, are willing to use more grades of concrete so that they can reduce the footprint by using lower grades of concrete on applications that don't require a high cement concrete?
Yeah, that's really where we try and really hammer home where we can really impact their global warming potential for their structure is really, what's not a critical path item? Is it okay to get, go to a 56-day strength for some elements, because then you can use, make a 4,000, really a 6,000 long-term in a 56-day strength scenario. So yeah, those are definitely part of the conversations we're having. I would say the contractors are a little bit more hesitant than a specifier or even an owner to want to do it, just because it's so different. It's out of the norm for them. But we've got, there's definitely contractors who are on board and realizing that it's a differentiation for themselves to be a part of that conversation, to be an advocate for it, not only, ask about it, but really offering these solutions. We have a particular contractor who offers multiple different levels of mixes based on the application, and then really lets the specifiers and the owners decide, what is their appetite for, what I would call risk at this point, because it is still fairly new. But yeah, that's definitely part of the conversation, because you can't continue to construct in the same way and have that big of an impact on your carbon footprint.
Do you have any specific examples of solutions that you've been able to develop as a result of having these early conversations with the contractors and developers?
Yeah, absolutely. So we, I can't necessarily name their name due to an NDA, but we've got a large tech firm that's building a very large data warehouse network out in our area. And, we originally submitted CarbonCure for the project, and they requested a meeting immediately. And I thought we were in trouble, but turns out they were pleased and excited that we were offering some type of low carbon solution. So, we've been working with them for probably about a little over a year now. And, the first project, we did a little bit of CarbonCure, kind of get the feet wet. And then now for the second phase of the project, we offer them different levels of carbon reduction. And, we're able to reduce from the baseline roughly about 70% on the foundation application, just because it's not such a critical path item. For them to strip the forms and move on, they only needed 500 PSI in a day. So, we were able to provide them different levels of reduction, and they chose the highest one to really have that impact. And they look at it from a perspective of, okay, based on the premium for the mix, how does that look like in terms of the amount of CO2 saved? So they rationalize it in terms of comparing it to what a carbon offset costs out on the open market. So as long as we're within that threshold and we don't impact the schedule for their project, it's been a really great relationship with them, the general contractor and the contractor. We've really learned, had some really good learning lessons, and have, now we're taking it to the point of trying to get that out to the community and say, hey, we can really do this, but this is how it has to work. These are the steps we need to take to work together to make it happen. It just can't be pushing it down from the top. It's got to be, all parties need to be involved to make it successful.
Yeah, that's a wonderful example of that kind of cooperation and where you found the opportunities specifically as a result of that cooperation. Cooperation along the supply chain is something that's often cited, but I think that's a wonderful illustration of it. Do you find that it's difficult to source the materials you would like to source to provide the low carbon concrete, or is that something that you're able to do?
It really depends. There's definitely some products out there that I would love to be able to use, but just from a logistics and transportation standpoint, it's not economically feasible and or from a carbon footprint, right? If I want to use a product from, say, the East Coast, even if the economics work out, by the time you truck it, rail it, or barge it over here, you're not really saving any CO2. So, that is one of the challenges, is trying to find these local materials that will work within our market and to piece them all together, right? Because it's just not one silver bullet that's going to drop your carbon footprint. You've got to take these different products, different cement replacements, add mixtures, and kind of put them all together and figure out what's the sweet spot. So yeah, the logistics can be a challenge, based on where you're at. It's not a one size fits all either. You go to the West Coast, they've got different challenges. Go down south, same idea. So it's really about what's available in your market, from an economics and CO2 standpoint.
Yeah, no, I think that fits into something that I call my grandmother's idea of good environmental behavior, which is essentially reusing things and buying locally. And I suspect this is kind of a theme we're going to see more of. If you think about where this is all going, if you think, 3 or 4 years down the road, how do you see this changing over time? Do you see the nature or the concrete mixes that you're producing in a few years' time being different from the ones you produce today, and how might that be different?
Yeah, I think so. I think, right now we're just kind of on the tipping point for this. So, the designs we're using now are they better than the ones we were using a couple of years ago? For sure. Are they really where we need to go? No. But I think given the conservative nature of, structural engineers and whatnot, we kind of need to baby step this along the way to get people comfortable with it. So, as we sit today, we've got a series of low carbon mixes that we call Carbon Sense. But I see those as an ever evolving, iteration of change. And I think we're going to continually see that global warming potential keep going down and down and down. But we've got to get everybody comfortable with what we're doing first before we kind of take that leap off the cliff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's clearly more appetite to take risk if the result of failure is not catastrophic. If you're building a bridge, you're probably a bit more risk averse than if you're building a parking lot.
Correct.
Yeah, let's go back to the original comment you made about hiring, because I think this is another area that's kind of interesting for everybody, perhaps from different angles. But hiring and retention, how has that changed post-pandemic for you?
For us, it's been just a challenge. In our Midwest market here in the Chicagoland area, we're a union environment, and obviously that comes with a seniority list. So for us, what we've seen is, retaining these drivers on the bottom of the seniority list is definitely a challenge, just because they're not getting the hours. I mean, it's tough to support a family on, $30,000 to $40,000 your first year driving a truck, and realistically, the uncertainty of the hours as well. You don't really know every day what your start time is, and you don't know when you're going to be done. So it's definitely a challenge, but I think, if you find the right person who enjoys what we're doing as a company, leaving a legacy, leaving an impact on our communities and building and things of that nature. If they look at it through that lens and they can, weather that storm, that's definitely, where you're going to find some very loyal employees. But the challenge is finding them, and we try to utilize our existing workforce for referrals and, try to reward them for that, because it does create an issue for us in terms of not only delivering concrete, but even getting the raw materials into our facilities.
Yeah.
Truckers, if you can't find a trucker to bring in the aggregates or the cement, I can't make concrete. Then I don't even need anybody to deliver it. So those are some of the challenges we're definitely facing now. And then you try to just to be more efficient with what you have, because you can't find people. So that's kind of where we're at. We're trying to be creative. We're trying to get out there and market ourselves as we're not just driving a truck. It's, there's more to it than that. It's trying to overcome that stigma of being a truck driver and what people think is maybe not so glorious of a job.
And are you trying to use technology to help communicate with customers and schedule trucks and make that all run more efficiently?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're even utilizing our internal app, so people can check the locations of their truck, put orders in, even get their tickets, moving along the e-ticketing line. So yeah, we're trying to utilize whatever resources we possibly can to make ourselves more efficient, and then obviously looking at metrics, making sure that we're running efficiently, taking the trucks, from the right locations and not, hauling longer than we need to. And really also working with our customers, instead of everybody wanting concrete between 6 o'clock and noon, we need to stretch this out a little bit just because of the situation we're in, utilize that full work day as opposed to slamming it all in before lunchtime.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point. Another topic we might just touch on is reinforcement. If you look at the carbon footprint of reinforced concrete, then obviously quite a chunk of it comes from the steel. Do you see when you're putting together concrete, well, not just concrete mixes, but when you're looking at how to satisfy the customers' demands for walls or slabs or whatever, do you look at the reinforcement side of it as well? Is that something that you're working with the steel supplier on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we really are trying to push the macro fiber market for a substitute for rebar and welded wire fabric. Unfortunately, I feel like that market really hasn't taken off as well as I thought it should have at this point in time. But, as part of that exercise, we went through with our EPD vendor and ran the numbers on what does it look like to replace certain applications. So we're able to provide our contractors with the necessary tools to go in there and say, hey, listen, I can take out the rebar, I can put in, X pounds of macro fiber, not only probably save you money, time, and, the risk of these guys out there putting the steel in, but also this is what I can do from a CO2 impact and show that as well. So yeah, every opportunity we get, we're submitting an alternative. We work with our fiber suppliers. If it's a little bit more complicated of a project, send them the information. They come back with engineered drawings. So yeah, that's part of what our daily specification group does, is really work to get that into these projects. I think there's just benefits from all parties.
And you were saying that you haven't seen as much of that as you think there could be. Is it just people not being used to it, or what do you think the resistance is?
Yeah, I think it's just, again, the conservative nature. It's something that's still in their eyes fairly new, but you'll find these pockets of people who, engineers who've used it and loved it, and that's all they spec now. But then, you try to flip some other projects and you get some hesitation and resistance. And, it's really just trying to educate them and let them know, what it is, how it works, where we've used it, just to reassure them that there's no issues with it. So yeah, I think it's just, it's still fairly new, I guess you would consider it in this type of industry based on how long the concrete industry's been around. So it's really just incrementally, gaining steam, and, I hope to see more of it as we continue to move on.
In terms of new materials, so I guess fiber is one of the areas where you get new materials, but in terms of new heavy materials, cementitious materials, aggregates, and so on, is there anything that you're looking at these days?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're really starting to look at and focus on is blended products, right? How can I take maybe a subpar product and blend it in with something and combine it maybe with another admixture or whatnot to make it a usable product, right? Something that would have gone to the landfill, now we can use without really affecting the performance too much. So really looking at blended SCMs, even blended cements. I think that's really where the wave of the future is going. I think PLC is just the start of that, so that's kind of what we're looking at from the cementitious side. From the aggregate side, it's really products like Blue Planet, where they're growing aggregates, using CO2 mineralization. There's a company called Carbon8 sort of doing the same thing. So, from the aggregate side, that's kind of what we're looking at. How do we now take a mix that's low carbon and continue to, incrementally drive that down further? So can I incorporate a portion of this type of aggregate that's been mineralized or things of that nature? So those are kind of some of the things that are high on our radar, and even looking into the future is, fly ash goes away, calcine clays, things of that nature, but again, that's a logistics issue as well. If you don't have a clay, deposit near your, facilities, it becomes a little bit of a challenge. So yeah, we're kind of, looking, down the road and figuring out, how are we going to be ready and be prepared for this continued trend.
And is that something that you take the initiative on, or is it something that you rely on your cement suppliers to provide you with?
We're lucky, we're blessed. We've got a full research and development team. We've got a couple lead researchers, data scientists on staff that just are really good at diving in and finding these different resources. And a lot of our partnerships with different universities kind of get us in tune to a lot of these things. So yeah, I mean, I would say the cement suppliers are, really their biggest solution right now is the PLC cement, but I wouldn't say they're necessarily coming to us with additional other products to utilize with it at this point in time.
Yeah. Just one topic I'd like to close with. In the UK, we've seen in the case of HS2, which is the high-speed rail project, that one of the contractors for that has been very keen to try to use the clay that they've excavated in the tunnels as a cementitious product for the concrete. Now, it's a very poor quality because it doesn't have very high kaolinite, but they're still quite keen to use it. Low grade concretes, some slabs or fill or whatever that they don't worry about too much. And I think that's a big change in mindset on the part of the contractors to be willing to get away from standard specifications and standard products in order to meet other objectives, in this case, sustainability objectives. Is that something that you're also seeing in this change of mindset? You've mentioned already the willingness to work together with, along the supply chain, but is there also a willingness to, let's say, be more creative in finding solutions rather than sticking to the standard way of doing things?
Yeah, I wish I could say we've seen that more around the States. Necessarily, I can't speak for other markets, but the Chicagoland market and the South Florida market where we operate, not too creative yet from the contractor side. I think you're getting a little bit more push down from owners, developers, things of that nature for them to kind of look at some of those things. But I think as we start to near upon these targets that have been set, whether it's net zero by 2030 or the SE 2050, I think you're going to start to see more of that. I think that's only going to have to happen for this to be successful. So I think just right now for us, it's really more right now they're in what I would call like a data collection phase. So everybody's kind of looking at what are they doing? What's their carbon footprint? Okay, we're comfortable with how we're recording this. And then, then they're going to start looking at, different ways to maybe change how they're doing things. For example, for us in the Chicagoland market for PT slabs, they like to stress the next morning, right? So you got to be at 3,300 PSI, within 18 hours roughly. So what we've had discussions with, not necessarily the contractors, but even some of the structural engineers is they're looking at ways, okay, well, can we change the way that system works? Can we change the way that the fasteners are attached or the stresses that are put on them so that we don't necessarily need that? So some of these conversations are happening. It's not necessarily coming from the contractor side yet, but I think that's going to evolve as time goes on because it has to for this to work.
Well, great. So thank you very much for speaking to me today, Ryan. This whole area of how low carbon concrete and the way in which we work together along the supply chain all the way up to the owners is changing is a really exciting area and one that's going to have a big influence on the way that the industry developed. So thank you very much for your comments today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.